Welcome back to the fourth part of the Ultimate Gnosticism Iceberg series. If you missed the last two videos that cover the first three tiers, you may want to go check that out in the playlist I have linked in the description. This is an iceberg that I created myself, and I have a link to download it on my website, which there's a link to it in the description as well. But now we're diving deeper into the fourth tier of the iceberg, the deep waters. At this level, we begin to explore how Gnostic ideas were preserved, adapted, and hidden within esoteric traditions and secret societies. Despite being branded as heresy and suppressed, Gnosticism never fully disappeared. It went underground, influencing groups that carried its core teachings forward in ways that were often secretive and symbolic. But real quick before we get started, if you like this type of content, then please remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure that you don't miss a future video. Also, I'm a little bit sick right now, so hopefully my voice hasn't changed much. Alright, got that out of the way. Let's dive in. Two of the most well-known esoteric secret societies, Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, are often thought to have preserved elements of Gnostic teachings in hidden forms. While neither group openly identifies as Gnostic, their symbols, rituals, and philosophies share striking similarities with Gnostic ideas. Freemasonry, which took shape in the 17th and 18th centuries, is rooted in an initiation-based system that draws from older mystical traditions like alchemy, Kabbalah, and Neoplatonism, all of which overlap with Gnostic thought. The idea that Freemasonry has direct ties to Gnosticism has fascinated scholars and Masonic historians for years, though there's no clear historical proof. One of the main reasons people link the two traditions is shared symbolism and the pursuit of hidden knowledge. Freemasonry uses symbols like the sun, moon, and geometric patterns, which some interpret as echoes of Gnostic imagery. Both traditions also emphasize initiation into mysteries and the idea that spiritual enlightenment comes through personal discovery rather than blind faith. Theorists like Regalini suggest that Gnostic ideas may have reached Europe through groups like the Crusaders, Rosicrucians, and the Knights Templar, eventually influencing Freemasonry. However, this remains a theory rather than a fact, as no direct historical links between the two traditions have ever been confirmed. While Freemasonry is not explicitly Gnostic, it does share some key themes. One is the pursuit of hidden knowledge, which was already mentioned. Masons seek enlightenment through symbolic rituals, much like how Gnostics believed in uncovering hidden truths beyond mainstream religion. Another theme is the rejection of literal religious dogmas. Many Freemasons believe in a grand architect of the universe, but their approach is philosophical rather than theological, resembling the Gnostic view of an unknowable divine source beyond religious institutions. The corrupt builder in Freemasonry, sometimes associated with Jabulon, a debated composite deity, has led some to believe there's a hidden Gnostic influence in certain branches of Freemasonry. Not everyone buys into the idea that Freemasonry has Gnostic roots, though. Masonic scholars like William Hugen and Albert Mackey argue that the sun and moon symbols in Freemasonry likely come from medieval stonemasonry and architecture, not Gnosticism. Similarly, they believe the use of sacred numbers in Masonic rituals can be traced back to Pythagorean and biblical traditions rather than Gnostic numerology. In their view, Freemasonry evolved more from Enlightenment thought, Christian allegory, and practical stonemasonry traditions than from ancient Gnostic sects. In my opinion, though, They underestimate the degree to which Gnosticism influenced those same schools of thought. Rosicrucianism emerged in the 17th century as a mystical secret society claiming to inherit ancient wisdom. Their teachings combine alchemy, Kabbalah, and Christian mysticism, but they also reflect strong Gnostic influences, particularly the rejection of material reality in favor of an inner spiritual truth, the belief that divine knowledge is accessible only to the initiated, and the idea of secret spiritual masters guiding humanity, similar to the Gnostic eons. Some scholars believe that the Rosicrucian manifestos were deliberately written in coded language, meant to attract seekers of esoteric wisdom, just like Gnostic texts, which were often hidden to escape persecution by religious authorities. While neither Freemasonry nor Rosicrucianism openly calls itself a Gnostic sect, both groups preserve elements of Gnostic wisdom through their symbols, allegories, and teachings. Whether these influences are direct remnants of ancient Gnosticism or simply parallel ideas that emerged in different times and cultures is still up for debate. What's clear, however, is that both societies embrace the same fundamental pursuit of hidden knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, a goal that has always been at the heart of Gnostic traditions. Moving on, we have Knights Templar and Cathars as Gnostic revivalists. The Cathars were a mystical Christian sect that thrived in the 12th and 13th century southern France, and their beliefs were shockingly similar to ancient Gnosticism. They saw the universe as dualistic, believing that the material world was corrupt and ruled by an impostor god, Rex Mundi, the king of the world, while the true God existed beyond it, in a purely spiritual realm. Because of this, they rejected Catholic teachings, including the sacraments, the physical church, and even the cross, believing that Jesus' suffering was an illusion, a radical idea that put them at direct odds with mainstream Christianity. The Cathars lived with extreme discipline, practicing strict asceticism to free their souls from the physical world. They avoided meat, sex, and wealth, believing these tied them to the material prison created by Rex Mundi. Because of their dangerous and heretical ideas, the Catholic Church saw them as a major threat and launched the Albigensian Crusade from 1209 to 1229, a brutal military campaign to wipe them out completely. Many believe that the Cathars were one of the last groups in medieval Europe to preserve authentic Gnostic teachings before being almost entirely erased from history. The Knights Templar, the legendary order of warrior monks, have long been linked to hidden knowledge in esoteric traditions. Some theories suggest that, during their time in the Holy Land, they may have discovered Gnostic secrets or been influenced by dualistic groups like the Cathars and mystical sects in the Middle East. The Templars were accused of worshipping Baphomet by King Philip IV, but some believe that Baphomet is a symbol of hidden wisdom rather than an idol. This led to speculation that the Templars may have possessed secret knowledge about Christ and the divine, possibly tied to Gnostic traditions. While hard evidence for these connections is scarce, the mysteries surrounding the Templars, their brutal suppression, and their rumored secrets have fueled the idea that they may have been part of a hidden Gnostic tradition that survived well into the Middle Ages. Even today, both the Cathars and the Templars remain at the heart of countless theories about lost wisdom, secret traditions, and their survival of Gnostic beliefs long after they were thought to have vanished. Next on the iceberg is John Dee's Enochian magic. John Dee, the Elizabethan scholar, mathematician, and occultist, is best known for developing Enochian magic, a complex system for contacting higher spiritual beings. While not explicitly Gnostic, Dee's work has a lot in common with Gnostic traditions, particularly the idea that hidden knowledge from higher realms is revealed to those who seek it. Dee, along with his scryer Edward Kelly, claimed to have received messages from angelic entities who communicated in an unknown celestial language. Dee believed that this was the original divine tongue spoken by Adam before the fall. The idea of a lost, sacred language that could restore direct contact with the divine is strikingly similar to Gnostic thought, where the soul, once awakened, remembers its divine origins and is able to escape the illusion of the material world. Much like the Gnostics sought liberation through secret wisdom, Dee believed that humanity could transcend earthly limitations by accessing divine knowledge. His Enochian system, with its hierarchy of angelic beings and multiple levels of reality, mirrors the Gnostic idea that spiritual ascent requires navigating through layers of divine emanations. To Dee, the universe was a structured system filled with invisible forces that could be understood and accessed through mystical practice. This aligns with the Gnostic belief that the material world is an illusion, but with the right knowledge, whether through sacred names, passwords, or divine guidance, one could rise beyond it. Dee was a devout Christian, but his writings hint at a more esoteric, mystical form of Christianity, where divine revelation was not a fixed doctrine, but an ongoing process. His Enochian angels often spoke in cryptic, paradoxical statements, much like the sayings in Gnostic texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus speaks in riddles meant to awaken higher understanding. Another parallel is the role of divine messengers. In Gnostic tradition, figures like Christ or Sophia descend to offer hidden wisdom, helping lost souls remember their divine origins. Similarly, Dee's system revolved around angels acting as intermediaries, delivering hidden knowledge to guide humanity beyond the material world. Although Dee is often remembered for his mystical experiments and early scientific pursuits, his deeper philosophy seems to resonate with Gnostic thought. Like the Gnostics, he saw knowledge as the key to transcending the material world, and like them, he sought to connect with higher beings beyond ordinary perception to uncover a hidden spiritual reality. Even though Gnostic ideas during this time were officially condemned and suppressed, they never really disappeared. Dee's work is just another example of how these ancient mystical teachings continue to surface in the esoteric traditions of the Western world. Next up, we have hidden Gnostic elements in Islam. At first glance, Islam and Gnosticism may seem like two completely different traditions, but if you look deeper, especially into Islamic mysticism like Sufism, you'll find some surprising similarities. Some scholars argue that Sufism, with its focus on inner knowledge, ecstatic experiences, and direct union with God, carries a strong Gnostic influence. Sufis believe that the material world is a veil, separating humanity from the divine. Their teachings often echo key Gnostic ideas. For example, the idea that the physical world is an illusion that blinds us to the higher spiritual reality. Also, the belief that each person carries a divine spark or inner light which must be awakened, and the rejection of rigid external religious law in favor of personal gnosis, or as they would describe it, direct knowledge of God. Sufi poets like Rumi and Ibn Arabi wrote extensively about the soul's journey to reunite with the divine, a theme that mirrors the Gnostic idea of escaping illusion and returning to the true God. Their descriptions of God as an unknowable mystery beyond human comprehension sound strikingly similar to the Gnostic concept of the monad, the ultimate source of all existence. Some Sufi sects also speak of hidden spiritual knowledge, ilm al-batin, which is only revealed to those spiritually prepared to receive it. This closely resembles the Gnostic belief in secret wisdom, accessible only to those who have been initiated into the higher truths. Some branches of Islamic esotericism even describe an intermediary figure who helps guide souls back to the divine realm. This is eerily similar to the role of Sophia or Christ in Gnostic traditions, where a divine being descends into the world to awaken lost souls. In my opinion, the most interesting and striking parallel between Islam and Gnosticism is the belief that Jesus did not die on the cross. According to the Quran, Jesus was not crucified, but rather it was made to appear so while God raised him up. This aligns with the Gnostic idea that Jesus' suffering was an illusion, a concept found in texts like the Gospel of Basilides and the second treatise of the Great Seth, which claims that someone else was crucified in his place while Jesus remained untouched by the material world's deception. Both traditions reject the idea that the true Christ could be bound by physical suffering, reinforcing the view that salvation comes from knowledge, not sacrifice. Mainstream Islam does not accept the concept of a demiurge, and it remains strictly monotheistic, but certain mystical interpretations contain echoes of Gnostic dualism, suggesting that Gnostic ideas may have subtly influenced aspects of Islamic mysticism over time. Whether this was a direct transmission or a case of parallel spiritual evolution remains open for debate, but the similarities are hard to ignore. Next up, we have alchemy and Hermeticism. Alchemy and Hermeticism are both esoteric traditions that center around hidden knowledge, transformation, and the pursuit of divine wisdom, ideas that closely align with Gnostic beliefs. While most people associate alchemy with the turning of base metals into gold, it was always much more than that. At its core, alchemy was a spiritual discipline, a path to self-transformation and enlightenment. Just as Gnosticism teaches that the material world is a prison, alchemy sees physical matter as a reflection of spiritual reality, something that can be purified and elevated to reveal its true divine nature. One of the most famous phrases in Hermetic thought, as above, so below, attributed to the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, perfectly captures this idea. Everything in the material world reflects higher spiritual truths. The philosopher's stone, often seen as the ultimate goal of alchemy, can be understood not just as a substance that transforms metals, but as a symbol of awakening, the discovery of the divine spark within, an idea deeply rooted in Gnostic teachings on spiritual liberation. In Gnostic tradition, Sophia is a divine being who descends into the material world, seeking reunion with the higher realm after her fall. This mirrors themes found in alchemy and Hermeticism, where wisdom is often represented as a divine feminine figure, sometimes depicted as a queen in alchemical texts or as the guiding force behind transformation. The idea is simple but profound. True enlightenment requires the restoration of lost wisdom, just as Sophia must ascend back to the divine after her exile in the lower world. Both Hermeticism and Gnosticism teach that the material world is not the ultimate reality, but rather a corrupt or illusory reflection of the divine. Alchemy doesn't explicitly mention a demiurge or a demiurge-like figure, but its obsession with purifying and transcending the material world suggests a similar belief in its imperfection. Many Hermetic texts describe the physical realm as fallen or deceptive, reinforcing the need for divine knowledge to escape it, an idea that closely parallels Gnostic cosmology. In Gnostic thought, enlightenment is often described as a journey through layers of reality, breaking free from archonic barriers to return to the divine realm. The alchemical process reflects the same idea through its three primary stages of transformation. The first is nigredo, or blackening, which is the darkness of ignorance, the death of the false self. The second is albedo, or whitening, purification and the discovery of hidden knowledge. And the third stage is rubedo, or reddening, the final stage of spiritual enlightenment and unity with the divine. Both Gnosticism and Hermeticism were heavily influenced by Neoplatonism, which viewed reality as a series of emanations from a single unknowable divine source. In Gnostic belief, the monad, the true God, exists beyond human understanding, and eons, divine emanations, emerge from it. Hermeticism describes a similar spiritual hierarchy, where enlightenment involves ascending through celestial spheres, each representing a higher level of divine awareness. This idea that human souls are divine sparks trapped in the material world, needing secret knowledge to return to their true origin, is central to both traditions. The influence of Gnosticism and Hermeticism didn't end in antiquity. These traditions shaped later Western esoteric thought, influencing Kabbalah, Christian mysticism, and Renaissance alchemy. Many alchemists, such as Paracelsus, saw their work as more than chemistry. It was a reflection of the soul's journey toward divine perfection. At their core, alchemy, Hermeticism, and Gnosticism all share a common vision. The material world is flawed or deceptive. True wisdom is hidden and must be actively sought. Salvation comes through inner transformation, not external religious practice. And the divine spark within each person can be awakened, leading to transcendence. Next up is Gnosticism and Theosophy. Theosophy, founded by Helena Blavatsky in the late 19th century, was an ambitious attempt to blend Western occult traditions with Eastern philosophies. At its heart, Theosophy emphasized hidden knowledge, spiritual evolution, and the idea that the material world is an illusion, all of which closely align with Gnostic thought. Blavatsky's writings, especially Isis Unveiled in 1877, helped introduce Gnostic ideas to the esoteric revival of the time. She saw Gnosticism as a key to understanding the hidden spiritual history of the world, drawing from ancient mystical texts to support her vision. Blavatsky believed that the Gnostics had preserved the true teachings of Christ, which she argued had been suppressed by the Orthodox Church. In Isis Unveiled, she described the demiurge not simply as an evil force, but as a lesser deity responsible for the suffering and ignorance of the material world. She even connected this idea to Hindu and Buddhist concepts of illusion, or Maya, reinforcing the idea that Gnosticism wasn't just a Christian offshoot, but part of a universal esoteric tradition. To her, Gnosticism was not a heresy, but rather a hidden path to enlightenment, one that tied together ancient wisdom traditions and the growing occult movement of the 19th century. Blavatsky's work had a huge influence on G.R.S. Mead, one of the most important scholars of Gnostic texts in the early 20th century. Mead was a close associate of Blavatsky and a major figure in the Theosophical Society. Unlike Blavatsky, he focused less on occult synthesis and more on serious academic study of Gnostic texts. His books, especially Fragments of a Faith Forgotten in 1900 and his early translation of the Pistis Sophia into English, introduced Gnostic scriptures to a Western audience at a time when interest in alternative spiritual traditions was growing. Mead saw Gnosticism as a part of a broader mystical tradition that linked together Christianity, Neoplatonism, and Eastern philosophy. His work played a major role in shaping the modern understanding of Gnosticism outside of traditional religious contexts. Another major figure influenced by Theosophy and Gnosticism was Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Anthroposophy. Steiner expanded on Blavatsky's ideas, incorporating Gnostic themes into his teachings on spiritual evolution. He viewed Christ as a divine being who came to liberate humanity from the limitations of material existence, a belief that closely aligns with the Gnostic portrayal of Jesus as a revealer of hidden wisdom. He referenced Gnosticism many times throughout his work, sometimes criticizing it for being an incomplete belief system, but using it as a foundation to build his philosophy. Thanks to Blavatsky, Mead, and Steiner, Gnostic ideas found new life in modern esoteric spirituality. Theosophy helped shape New Age movements, while Anthroposophy developed its own spiritual system that continues to influence alternative education, holistic health, and mystical thought today. Through Theosophy, Gnosticism became more than just an obscure ancient movement. It became part of a larger spiritual revival, one that sought to reclaim hidden wisdom and transcend the material world. Next is the 7 Sermons of the Dead, a book written by the one and only Carl Jung. I mentioned Carl Jung and those 7 Sermons of the Dead in the last tier when talking about Abraxas, but you can go so much more in depth with him. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in modern psychology, was deeply fascinated by Gnosticism, and it shows in his theories of the psyche and the collective unconscious. He didn't see Gnostic myths as just religious stories. To him, they were symbolic expressions of deep psychological truths. The Gnostic struggle between light and darkness, the fragmented soul, and the search for divine knowledge all mirrored what he believed were the inner workings of the human mind. Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, a realm of shared, inherited symbols and archetypes, has a lot in common with the Gnostic belief that hidden truths exist beyond ordinary perception and can only be accessed through direct personal experience. He saw the demiurge, the false creator of the material world, as an archetype of oppressive authority. Just as the demiurge keeps humanity trapped in illusion, Jung saw the ego as a force that limits spiritual and psychological growth by keeping us too focused on material reality. In Gnostic thought, the divine spark must awaken to escape the demiurge's control. And for Jung, true growth meant integrating unconscious knowledge to achieve wholeness, a process he called individuation. Jung was particularly drawn to Sophia. He saw her as an archetype of the anima, the feminine aspect of the unconscious that guides individuals towards self-realization. He also linked the pleroma to his own concept of psychological integration, the unification of the conscious and the unconscious mind. To Jung, this wasn't just a metaphor, it was a roadmap for personal transformation, one that mirrored the Gnostic journey to spiritual awakening. Jung's direct engagement with Gnostic thought is most evident in the 7 Sermons to the Dead, a mystical work that he wrote under the pseudonym Basilides after the early Gnostic teacher. The text lays out a Gnostic-inspired cosmology, describing a divine reality beyond the material world and the need for inner transformation. For Jung, Gnosticism wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was one of the earliest attempts to understand the human condition on a deep psychological level. Through a series of 7 metaphorical sermons, the text explores the depths of the human psyche, delving into themes like the nature of the unconscious, the duality of opposites, and the concept of the pleroma, drawing heavily on Gnostic symbolism to present a profound vision of the human soul's journey toward wholeness. It's considered a key text in understanding Jung's early exploration of the unconscious mind and archetypal imagery. For Jung, Gnosticism wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was one of the earliest attempts to understand the human condition on a deep psychological level. He believed that its insights were still highly relevant in helping modern people find spiritual meaning in their own lives. Jung's fascination with Gnosticism helped shape depth psychology, and his influence is still felt today. Many modern Jungian analysts continue to explore the relationship between Gnostic myths and personal transformation, showing how these ancient ideas can help people navigate their own psychological and spiritual journeys. Thanks to Jung, Gnosticism is no longer just an obscure religious movement. It has become an enduring framework for understanding the mind, the self, and the search for deeper meaning in life. Next up, we have Gnosticism is Western Buddhism. Many scholars have noticed striking similarities between Gnosticism and Buddhism, leading some to suggest that Gnosticism could be thought of as a kind of Western Buddhism, or at least a reflection of similar spiritual ideas. Both traditions share the belief that the material world is an illusion, that ignorance keeps people trapped in suffering, and that true liberation comes through knowledge and enlightenment rather than faith in an external deity. One of the strongest connections between the two is the idea that the world is a deception that must be transcended. In Buddhism, this concept appears in the idea of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, which is sustained by ignorance and attachment. Gnosticism expresses a similar idea, describing the physical world as a kind of prison ruled by the demiurge, a false god who keeps souls trapped in illusion. Both systems emphasize that ordinary human perception is flawed and that the path to true freedom involves awakening to the true nature of reality. Another key similarity is their shared rejection of blind faith in religious authority in favor of direct experience. In Buddhism, liberation or nirvana comes through deep meditation, wisdom, and self-inquiry, rather than through worship or obedience to religious institutions. Gnosticism takes a similar approach, teaching that salvation isn't about faith in an external savior, but comes through gnosis, an internal realization of hidden divine truth. Both traditions insist that the individual must walk the path to enlightenment themselves, rather than relying on an external power for redemption. Even their descriptions of ultimate liberation align. The Buddhist concept of nirvana, a state beyond duality, existence, and non-existence, where suffering and illusion cease, has strong parallels to the Gnostic idea of returning to the pleroma. Just as nirvana represents complete transcendence, the pleroma is a state beyond the physical world where the soul is reunited with the true God. In both systems, the goal is to break free from the cycle of illusion and ignorance, reaching a state of profound peace and spiritual knowledge. Certain Buddhist traditions, like Vajrayana and Zen, also reflect Gnostic themes of hidden knowledge and initiation into deeper truths. Some Mahayana Buddhist texts describe multiple levels of reality, with different spiritual beings overseeing different realms of existence, which is strikingly similar to the Gnostic hierarchy of eons and the demiurge. Vajrayana Buddhism even includes the idea that some Buddhas choose to remain in lower worlds to help others escape, a concept that closely mirrors the Gnostic myth of Sophia's fall and redemption. While Gnosticism developed in the Greco-Roman and Judaic world, its core philosophy is in many ways closer to Buddhism than to mainstream Christianity. Both traditions view the material world as an obstacle to spiritual enlightenment, emphasize personal awakening over religious dogma, and describe a path to liberation that relies on deep inner knowledge rather than external salvation. Some scholars speculate that early Buddhist thought may have influenced Gnostic ideas. Cultural exchanges between India and the Hellenistic world were well documented after Alexander the Great's conquests, and certain Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas, contain sayings that bear strong resemblance to Eastern spiritual teachings. Of course, there are also differences. Buddhism generally views reincarnation as part of the natural order, while Gnosticism sees it as another form of entrapment within the demiurge's realm. But despite these distinctions, both traditions ultimately seek the same goal: escaping illusion and returning to a transcendent state of being. That's why some scholars describe Gnosticism as a kind of Western Buddhism, a system that arose independently but attempted to answer the same fundamental spiritual questions that Buddhism addressed in the East. And finally for this tier, we have Renaissance Gnosticism. We already talked about John Dee and his Enochian magic that occurred during the Renaissance, but there were other forms of Gnostic thought popping up during this period in other places like Italy. There was a major revival of esoteric traditions, and some of the era's most influential thinkers, like Pico della Mirandola and Giordano Bruno, seemed to incorporate Gnostic ideas into their mystical philosophies, even though much of what we know about Gnosticism wasn't fully rediscovered until centuries later. Pico, best known for his oration on the dignity of man, sought to bring together different spiritual traditions, including Neoplatonism, Kabbalah, and Hermeticism, all of which had strong Gnostic undercurrents. He believed that human beings had divine potential, and that this potential could be unlocked through intellectual and mystical striving. This idea aligns closely with the Gnostic belief that the divine spark must be awakened through gnosis. Pico also blended Kabbalistic thought with Christian mysticism, much like the Gnostics, who reinterpreted traditional religious texts to uncover their hidden, esoteric meanings. His system of magic and spiritual ascent was based on the idea that knowledge itself could elevate the soul beyond the limitations of the material world, reflecting the same liberation through enlightenment found in Gnostic traditions. Giordano Bruno took these ideas even further, pushing a radical vision of the cosmos that directly challenged both religious and scientific orthodoxy. His belief in an infinite universe filled with countless worlds, each containing divine sparks of consciousness, sounds a lot like Gnostic cosmology, where the material realm is vast but ultimately subordinate to the spiritual. Like the Gnostics, Bruno rejected the authoritarian control of religious institutions, much as they rejected the demiurge and his archons, the false rulers of the material world. Bruno also believed that deep meditation, intense study, and altered states of consciousness could reconnect a person with the divine source, an idea that closely mirrors the Gnostic path to spiritual liberation. His execution for heresy in 1600 at the hands of the Catholic Church is a stark reminder of the long-standing tension between institutionalized religion and esoteric spiritual traditions, a conflict that had already played out centuries earlier when the Gnostics were brutally suppressed. Pico and Bruno may not have had direct access to Gnostic scriptures, but their ideas reflect many of the same core themes: the rejection of rigid dogma, the belief in hidden wisdom, and the conviction that true enlightenment comes not from obedience, but from the direct pursuit of divine knowledge. Alright, that's it for the fourth tier of the Ultimate Gnosticism Iceberg. Thanks again for watching. Let me know what you thought of this tier, which topics interested you the most, which surprised you. I look forward to reading all through your comments. We've got a lot more coming as we go even deeper into the iceberg that you're not going to want to miss, so make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thanks again for joining me. Until next time.